Welcome to my presentation. So I'm going to be talking about moments of meeting, the experiences and understanding of trainee counsellors, which was the subject of our research project. So I'd like to start by asking if you've ever experienced a moment of connection with another person where you felt truly understood and seen and something shifted in your relationship. If you have, then you may have been experiencing a moment of meeting, which is what this presentation is going to be about. So firstly, I'm going to give you an introduction, talk about what a moment of meeting is and why this study is valuable, the method, how we conducted the study and the results, what we found, and then conclusions. So what do these findings mean and how could they potentially impact the field? And then a take-home message. So first of all, what is a moment of meeting? So a moment of meeting is described by Duarte as an instant emotionally impactful moment which enhances a therapeutic alliance, and Stern describes them as significant defining moments between therapist and client born of authentic, spontaneous connection and understanding between two people. And both these researchers agree that these powerful, impactful, close moments are preceded by what they call now moments, which are moments of potential risk of therapeutic relationship rupture. So there's a moment of danger, and if handled with authenticity and met well, they turn into a moment of meeting, which is a powerful catalyst for relationship enhancement. So you remember at the beginning I asked what if you'd ever experienced something like this, and the reason I joined this group is because when I learned about it, I joined a couple of weeks in, I learned what a moment of meeting was. I realised I believe I had experienced that myself, both in my counselling practice when I was practising being a therapist and in my own personal therapy. And Duarte actually found that clients remembered these moments a long time afterwards as emotionally meaningful and significant, meaning that a moment of meeting might even have a sleeper effect, a long-term effect. In my own personal experience, they led to, big therapeutic gains afterwards. So I was very keen to be involved. When we were researching into moments of meeting, we found that there was a lot on how they were experienced by fully qualified, fully experienced therapists, but nothing on trainees. So we'd found a gap in the literature. So there were, why might this study be important? What implications might it have? So for one thing, we know from research that the relationship itself is one of the most important factors in therapeutic outcome. Lambert and Barley have showed this. I'm going to have all my references at the end. And there have been things like, so for example, the PCT core conditions and the psychodynamic concept of holding and secure base have been shown to be very effective, as has the rupture repair model by Safran and Moran. These are all very effective. They're all relationship focused techniques or theory. However, they happen over a long time, consistent responses from a therapist, for example, for holding. Or with PCT. However, moments of meeting are instantaneous. They bring about an instantaneous deepening of that relationship. So that might mean they have really positive implications for short-term therapy, which is really common in the UK at the moment. So for example, I have my placement with the NHS. So the NHS initially offers 6 to 8 sessions, and then there's a review, and you can increase those sessions if there seemed to be significant therapeutic need. So if there were more moments of meeting, if the relationship was stronger from earlier on, which, as I say, has been linked to better outcomes, a strong relationship has been linked to better therapeutic outcomes, there might be less need for these extensions. There might be able to be more effective work done within those 6 to 8 sessions. And this might have implications then for waiting lists. If we're not extending everyone to 16 sessions, in fact they're only having 6 to 8 and there's effective work being done, we can then bring in clients sooner. So the waiting list is shorter, which might have a really positive effect on the therapy itself, because earlier intervention has been linked to more positive outcomes, which Singh found in 2010. The NHS is struggling with waiting lists, according to an exploration this year by the British Medical Association, and I'm sure we can attest to that in our own experience. So earlier intervention can have lots of positive effects. So I personally had clients that arrived and said, I've been on this waiting list for 8 months, and if I'd been seen a month in, my depression might have not got to the level that it is at now. So we could potentially catch people earlier. And of course, shorter waiting lists has huge financial implications, and this same British Medical Association review and exploration found that the NHS was really struggling financially at the moment. So why trainees? Why is it important to look at this from a trainee's perspective? So this is really interesting. We feel that trainees could offer a very valuable position to investigate this. Research from Ronestad and Skovholt in 2003 suggested that trainees are more likely to monitor their internal processes more closely than experienced therapists, and this could increase their awareness of subtle relational shifts. It could increase their awareness of moments of meeting, and it could increase their awareness of what was different about that session because they're apparently monitoring more. And in contrast, more experienced therapists, which is where all the prior research has been done, have been shown to potentially perceive moments of meeting as more routine and therefore less consciously recognised, according to Skovholt and Ronestad in 1992. So trainees are also still developing their own therapeutic style and therefore experimenting with different approaches, according to Hill et al. In 2007, which means they might be trying out different things, and we might realise from our data, we might have seen certain patterns emerging of conditions that more consistently led to moments of meeting. And if we can understand what conditions lead to it, what can we put in place to make an MOM more likely to occur, we might be able to incorporate this into training. We might be able to have more moments of meeting occurring, which could really benefit short-term therapy. It could mean that if we're doing more effective work in a shorter frame of time, there might be less people having to come back to therapy, which again positively impacts both people's mental health and waiting lists and the earlier intervention that we discussed earlier. So that led to our research question of how are moments of meeting perceived by trainee counsellors, what role do they play, and what role do they believe such moments play in shaping the therapeutic relationship and process. So our method, we had a qualitative research design. We used an inductive approach, so we saw where the data took us rather than going in with a presupposed hypothesis. So we let the themes emerge from the data. We were open to what was going to come out rather than imposing something beforehand. Our participants were 7 trainee counsellors. They were all in postgraduate counselling, psychotherapy training in the UK. They were all currently on placement. They needed to be over 18, registered with a professional body like the BACP or NCPS, currently performing a minimum of 1 hour's client work per month and a minimum of 1.5 hours supervision per month. And they all needed to have experienced or believe they have experienced a moment of meeting from the description that we gave. This was a small sample size, but it was appropriate, according to research, for an in-depth qualitative exploration of this level. So for our data collection, we used semi-structured interviews. So they were open questions, but not yes and no. And because they were semi-structured, we had a guide, but we were also able to follow up on strands that seemed interesting and were giving us rich data. So we had flexibility and further depth while also maintaining that focus. The interviews lasted between 45 and 90 minutes. They were conducted online via Microsoft Teams, and they were audio recorded, video recorded and transcribed on Teams, and then those transcriptions were checked manually by us after. So procedure and materials. Recruitment was originally planned via emails and online postings, but and word of mouth, but it ended up being completely via word of mouth. So our participants, when they were interested, they were provided with a participant information sheet, and then an informed consent form and an eligibility questionnaire. And once that was all, ticked, okayed, we obtained written consent to be involved in the study and to be recorded. Verbal consent was reconfirmed at the start of the interview. on video. Participants also received their transcript sent to them so they could have a look through if they wanted and say, actually, I need that removed because of client confidentiality. They received a debrief and a follow-up email, and there was signposting to support services at the end as well. So our analysis, we used reflexive thematic analysis by Braun and Clark, 2024. So the analysis was identifying patterns of meaning across the accounts. So we coded things that were coming up, and then we went into sub-themes, and then we came up with our overall themes, and we did that. We had discussions all together, but we came up with our own themes separately of what we thought was most important from the data. So, you know, on reflection, we can also mention all the researchers were trainee counsellors themselves. So while this provided a lot of insight and meant we could ask interesting questions, there was also a potential for us to bring our own bias in. And we were aware of that, and we addressed it through ongoing reflective practice, like personally, and we also did collaborative coding and discussion of themes so we could help keep each other in check, and we also had our own personal supervision to try and mitigate any bias there. In terms of ethics, we followed BPS and BACP ethical guidelines, and we had ethics approval granted by Bangor University Ethics Committee. We ensured informed consent, and we made sure the participants were fully aware that they had a right to withdraw at any point, and we reiterated this. And in terms of we had confidentiality, and we had secure data storage to keep that safe. And we monitored for distress in the interviews and provided appropriate support and signposted, as I say, to relevant organisations if participants did want to talk to somebody else afterwards. So our results. So I found 6 themes really stood out to me. So across accounts, moments of meeting were described as occurring during emotionally intense points in therapy. They involved intuition, connection, and relational risk, and they led to meaningful therapeutic change and development. So I sorted it into these key themes. So one was intuition as an embodied and relationally attuned process. So participants felt that they came from their intuition rather than theory. In that moment, they were thinking about their gut instinct rather than theoretical models. They described them as the embodied, sort of relational. They just knew what to do. They knew to go for it. And they linked it to growing trust within themselves, sort of bodily, as a practitioner. So we've got a key quote there: I acted more intuitively rather than consciously drawing up models. Another theme was synchronicity, shared meaning making, and mutual recognition. So these moments of meeting often involved unexpected shared experience, understanding, or coincidence. There was a moment of mutual recognition between the people there, so counsellor and client, but as humans. This created a strong sense of mutual recognition and connection, and it was often experienced as quite striking, quite meaningful. And we had a quote saying, I just couldn't believe it. We just couldn't believe it. There was a shared sort of wow moment. Another theme was navigating the risk of therapeutic rupture in moments of engagement. So this aligned with previous research on now moments. So the participants felt that there was a moment of uncertainty and relational risk that preceded their moments of meeting, and they felt a nervousness and a tension and wondering, should I challenge, should I self-disclose, or should I hold back? And they were aware that there was a risk of disrupting the relationship or potentially deepening it. A quote was, I just thought it was worth the risk. Another theme was moments of meeting as catalysts for therapeutic transformation. So they were seen as turning points within their work together, within the session and within the work together, and they led to increased trust and openness, stronger therapeutic alliance, and deeper emotional insight. And our key quote was, after this we were more connected. 5th theme was professional growth through experiential learning and developing therapeutic confidence. So moments of meeting functioned as powerful learning experiences and increased the participants, the trainee counsellors, confidence, trust in their own clinical judgment, and sense of professional identity. And a key quote was, it helped me trust myself. And the final theme was the role of supervision, and supervision as a reflective and preparatory space. So supervision provided emotional support and reflection and processing, ethical guidance, and very importantly for me, I felt, helped prepare trainees to take relational risk-taking in certain instances. And one key quote was, "The supervision definitely gave me courage." Gave me the courage. And this is a table I did of our themes and sub-themes. Move me there so you can see. Okay. Now discussion. So a lot of what we found aligned with existing literature. Oh, this has stopped working. It aligned with existing literature around authenticity and risk. Yeah. So our findings align with existing literature on MOMs and how they're experienced by qualified and experienced therapists, particularly regarding the role of authenticity and allowing them to occur. They're leading to therapeutic shift, and the way they're often preceded by moments of perceived relational risk or rupture. So that's consistent with Stern's work, Duarte's work, and Safran and Moran's rupture repair framework. However, exploring it within this trainee context led to some, I think, contributions to the literature. In particular, that moments of meeting were not always experienced as entirely spontaneous. So our findings suggested that they sometimes involved elements of prior reflection and preparation, most particularly in supervision, with participants thinking in advance about whether to challenge or self-disclose, being aware that there was an element of risk, potentially anticipating a now moment, and then intuitively acting on that in the session when the right moment arose and they thought, yeah, this is the right thing to do, actually I'm going for it. So yeah, the role of supervision emerged as very important, I felt. So it appeared to have a dual role in moments of meeting among trainee counsellors. So it was reflective. Participants described processing these moments afterwards with their supervisor, and that helped their confidence, because sometimes they went in there worrying that they were going to be told off for following intuition rather than strictly following theory, and the fact that their supervisor actually said, no, you followed your instinct and that was correct, gave them more confidence. And the key, there was a preparatory role, so they almost felt like they were given permission and reassurance to self-disclose, to challenge, because they'd discussed it beforehand. And then when it felt like the right moment, they did it in the session, and they felt that they were still acting ethically. And it went really well. So supervision may act as a bridge between intuition and considered, thought-through action, which could lead to MOMs. There are, for example, if this research might be incorporated into how we train, perhaps people could work on role plays that help us do relational cues, realise what might be appropriate opportunities, tolerating risk, balancing authentic presence with theoretical technique, and keeping people in check so they don't go chasing these now moments, but also handle them ethically. But yeah, there could be huge potential benefits to short-term therapy if there are more MOMs, as discussed earlier. This was a small study, and it would be great if future research studied a wider population. There is a potential for memory bias and selective recall, because it was people's retrospective accounts, but participants were trainees in the field of counselling. They might have read about MOMs before, but potentially future research could look at recordings or be present in sessions rather than asking people about their experiences afterwards. Yeah, so there could be really great contributions to the field from this. But there is definitely further research needed, because we don't know that it would have this effect on short-term therapy. This is just a hypothesis. But it's definitely worth looking into more. So thank you very much for coming and for listening, and here are my team and here are my references.